Lisa moved into Pinewood Heights on a sunny Tuesday morning. The moving truck had barely pulled away when she noticed how perfect everything looked. Every lawn was trimmed to exactly the same height. Every mailbox was painted the same shade of black. Even the trees seemed to line up in perfect rows like soldiers standing at attention. She didn't mind, though. After 20 years of teaching self-defense classes in the busy downtown area, she was ready for some peace and quiet. Her new house was small but cozy, with a front porch just big enough for a rocking chair and a few potted plants. She'd always dreamed of having a little garden where she could grow tomatoes and maybe some herbs. The neighbors seemed friendly enough. The elderly couple next door waved at her while watering their flowers. A young family across the street gave her a smile as they loaded their kids into the minivan. Everyone seemed nice, but there was something odd she couldn't quite put her finger on. People would start conversations, but then glance around nervously before hurrying back inside their homes. Lisa spent her first week unpacking boxes and arranging furniture. She hung her diploma from the Martial Arts Academy in her home office, along with photos from various competitions. Nobody needed to know about that part of her life unless it came up naturally. She'd learned over the years that telling people you're a black belt sometimes makes them uncomfortable, like they're walking on eggshells around you. On Saturday morning, she was planting flowers in her front garden when a black Mercedes pulled up to her curb. A tall man in his 60s stepped out wearing pressed khaki pants and a polo shirt with some kind of emblem on it. He had that look about him, the kind of guy who probably introduced himself by listing his job title and how much his watch cost. "Good morning," he said, though his tone suggested it wasn't particularly good. "I'm Robert Henderson, president of the Pinewood Heights Homeowners Association." Lisa wiped the dirt from her hands and stood up. "Nice to meet you. I'm Lisa. Just moved in last week." "Yes, I'm aware." He pulled out a tablet and started tapping on it. "I make it a point to introduce myself to all new residents. We have very high standards here at Pinewood Heights. It's what keeps our property values strong." "That's great," Lisa said, trying to stay polite. "Everyone seems to take good care of their homes. They do because they follow the rules." Robert looked at her garden, then at his tablet. "I notice you're doing some landscaping. Did you submit a landscaping proposal to the HOA board for approval?" Lisa blinked. "I'm just planting some flowers. Do I need permission for that?" Section 12, paragraph 4 of the HOA guidelines clearly states that any exterior modifications, including landscaping changes, require written approval. He said it like he was reciting from a legal document. "The application needs to be submitted at least 30 days in advance." "I'm sorry, I didn't know. I haven't had a chance to read through all the paperwork yet." Robert's expression didn't soften. "Ignorance of the rules doesn't exempt you from following them. I'll let it slide this time, but I expect you to familiarize yourself with our guidelines immediately. They were in your welcome packet." Lisa nodded, biting back what she really wanted to say. Years of teaching kids and adults to control their emotions in stressful situations had taught her the value of staying calm. "I'll read through everything today. See that you do." He started walking back to his car, then stopped and turned around. "Oh, and one more thing. That Buddha statue you have on your porch. It'll need to come down." "What?" Lisa glanced at the small stone statue sitting among her potted plants. It was only about 10 inches tall, a gift from her martial arts instructor when she earned her black belt. "Why?" "Religious displays are prohibited in front yards. Section 18. They can be polarizing to the community." "It's not a religious display," Lisa explained. "It's just a decorative piece. It has personal meaning to me. The guidelines don't distinguish between religious and decorative. If it depicts a religious figure, it's prohibited. Period." Robert opened his car door. "I'll expect it to be removed by Monday. Have a nice day." He drove off before Lisa could respond, leaving her standing in her front yard feeling like she'd just been scolded by a school principal. She looked at the little Buddha statue and sighed. This was exactly the kind of thing she'd hoped to avoid by moving to a quiet neighborhood. The elderly neighbor from next door walked over, carrying a watering can. "I see you met Robert," she said quietly. "Yeah, he's something." The woman looked around nervously, just like everyone else seemed to do. "Just a friendly warning, dear. Don't make waves with him. He's been HOA president for 8 years, and he doesn't like it when people question his authority. Trust me, it's easier to just do what he says." "But what about the statue?" "It's not bothering anyone. The neighbor glanced at Robert's car disappearing around the corner. Lots of things don't bother anyone, but if Robert says they're against the rules, you'll get fined. Some people have tried fighting him, and it never ends well. He'll find every tiny violation he can until you either comply or move away. Lisa watched the woman hurry back to her house, and something stirred in her chest. Not anger exactly, but recognition. She'd seen bullies before, plenty of them. They always operated the same way, using whatever power they had to make other people feel small. The location changed, the tactics varied, but the core behavior was always identical. She picked up her gardening tools and went inside, leaving the Buddha statue exactly where it was. 20 years of martial arts had taught her many things, but the most important lesson was this: you don't earn respect by backing down from bullies. You earn it by standing your ground with dignity, even when it's uncomfortable. Robert Henderson had no idea who he was dealing with, and Lisa preferred to keep it that way. At least for now. Monday morning came and went, and the Buddha statue remained on Lisa's porch. She'd read through the entire HOA guidebook over the weekend, all 73 pages of it. The rules were ridiculous. No basketball hoops, no garden gnomes, no wind chimes, no flower pots in colors other than terracotta or dark green. It was like living in a museum where someone had decided that personal expression was a crime. By Tuesday afternoon, an official notice appeared in her mailbox. The envelope was marked "Violation Notice" in bold red letters. Inside was a letter stating that she had 24 hours to remove the prohibited item or face a fine of $50 per day. It was signed by Robert Henderson in a signature so elaborate it looked like it had taken him 5 minutes to write. Lisa stood in her driveway, reading the notice for the third time. Her old instructor's voice echoed in her mind. When someone pushes, don't push back right away. Watch, learn, understand your opponent before you make your move. She decided to attend the next HOA meeting. If she was going to live here, she might as well understand how things worked. Maybe there was a reasonable explanation for all these rules. Maybe Robert was just having a bad day when they first met. The meeting was held Thursday evening in the community center, a bland beige building that looked like every other community center in America. Lisa arrived 15 minutes early and took a seat in the back row. About 20 other homeowners were scattered throughout the room, most of them looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. Robert sat at a long table at the front, flanked by 4 board members who seemed to nod at everything he said. He called the meeting to order with a sharp rap of his gavel, and Lisa couldn't help but notice how much he seemed to enjoy that little wooden hammer. The meeting dragged on for 40 minutes about things like pool maintenance schedules and trash pickup days. Finally, Robert asked if there was any new business. Lisa raised her hand. Yes? Robert said, looking at her over his reading glasses. The new resident on Maple Drive. Lisa, she said, standing up. I wanted to ask about the decoration guidelines. Specifically, why a small statue would be considered a violation. A few people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. One woman whispered something to her husband. Robert leaned back in his chair. The guidelines are very clear. We don't allow religious displays in front yards. It maintains neutrality and prevents conflicts between neighbors with different beliefs. But it's not a religious display, Lisa explained calmly. It's a decorative piece. And even if it were, doesn't that seem a bit restrictive? I mean, people have Christmas decorations up for 2 months every year. Christmas decorations are temporary and fall under our holiday exception clause, Robert said. His voice had that practiced tone of someone who'd had this argument before. Permanent displays are different. The rule exists for a reason. What reason exactly? Lisa kept her voice level and polite. I'm not trying to be difficult. I genuinely want to understand. Robert's jaw tightened slightly. The reason is that it's the rule. This association was built on certain standards, and those standards are what make this neighborhood desirable. If we let one person break the rules, then everyone will want exceptions. Before you know it, we'll have pink flamingos and tire swings in every yard. A nervous laugh rippled through the room, but Lisa noticed it wasn't because anyone found it funny. It was the kind of laugh people make when they're uncomfortable and don't know what else to do. I'm not asking for pink flamingos, Lisa said. I'm asking about a 10-inch statue that's been on my porch for 2 weeks without a single complaint from any actual neighbor. Has anyone complained about it? Robert stood up, placing both hands on the table. Complaints aren't required for enforcement. I, as president, am authorized to identify violations and issue citations. That's my job. And right now, you're in violation. The fine schedule has already begun. You're at $100 as of this morning. Lisa felt that familiar sensation in her stomach, the one she always got when she watched someone try to intimidate others. It was the same feeling she'd had watching bullies in the dojo, the same feeling she'd had teaching women who'd been pushed around by aggressive partners or bosses. But she kept her face neutral, her breathing steady. "I see," she said quietly. "Thank you for explaining." She sat back down, and Robert moved on to the next agenda item like nothing had happened. But Lisa noticed something interesting. After the meeting ended, 3 different homeowners approached her in the parking lot. The first was a man in his 40s wearing a rumpled work shirt. "That was brave," he whispered. "I tried questioning him last year about the rule that says we can't park our cars in our own driveways overnight. Got fined $300 before I gave up." The second was a young woman with tired eyes. "He made me cut down a tree in my backyard because he said it was blocking his view from 2 streets over. Cost me $800 to have it removed, plus the fines while I was saving up for it." The third was an older gentleman who walked with a cane. "Been living here 12 years, he said. Robert's been president for 8 of them. Every year he gets worse. People are afraid to even paint their front doors without his approval. We've tried voting him out twice, but he controls the board. They vote however he tells them to." Lisa listened to each story, thanking them for sharing. As she drove home, she thought about the Buddha statue sitting on her porch. She'd bought it at a garage sale 10 years ago, just thought it looked peaceful. Her instructor had laughed when he saw it, then got serious and told her something she'd never forgotten. "Real martial arts isn't about fighting," he'd said. "It's about standing firm when others try to push you down. It's about protecting the weak and facing bullies with courage. The kicks and punches? Those are just tools. The real weapon is your spirit." Lisa parked in her driveway and looked at her little statue. The fine was up to $150 now. By next week, it would be over $400. She could afford it, but that wasn't the point. The point was that Robert Henderson had made a mistake. He'd assumed she was like everyone else in this neighborhood, someone who would cave under pressure. She walked up to her porch, adjusted the statue slightly so it caught the evening light just right, and went inside to make dinner. Tomorrow, she'd check her mail for another violation notice, and the day after that, and the day after that. Because if there was one thing 20 years of martial arts had taught her, it was patience. And Robert was about to learn that patience, when combined with quiet determination, was more powerful than any gavel. 3 weeks passed and the fines kept coming. Lisa's mailbox became a daily delivery system for violation notices. First it was the statue. Then Robert cited her for parking her car improperly in her driveway, claiming it was 3 inches over some invisible line. Next came a notice about her grass being a 1/4 inch too tall, even though she'd mowed it the day before. The fines added up quickly. $700, then $900. By the end of the month, she was looking at over $1,000 in penalties. But Lisa paid each one without complaint, keeping careful records of every notice, every fine, every interaction. Her instructor had taught her to document everything when dealing with difficult people. "Paper trails don't lie," he used to say. What Robert didn't know was that Lisa had started talking to more neighbors. Not openly, not in a way that would get back to him. Just quiet conversations at the mailbox, brief chats while walking around the block. She learned that Robert's reign of terror had been going on for years. One family had been forced to repaint their entire house because Robert claimed the color was off-white instead of pure white, even though nobody else could tell the difference. Another resident had received daily fines for 6 months because a single shingle on their roof was slightly darker than the others. The breaking point came on a Saturday morning. Lisa woke up to find her car missing from her driveway. At first, she thought it had been stolen. Then she saw the notice taped to her front door. Her vehicle had been towed for being an eyesore that diminishes neighborhood aesthetics. She looked at the notice in disbelief. Her car had a small dent in the rear bumper from a parking lot mishap 2 years ago. It was barely noticeable unless you were specifically looking for it, But apparently Robert had been doing exactly that. Lisa called the towing company. The fee to get her car back was $320 and they only accepted cash. The nearest ATM was 2 miles away and she had no way to get there except walking. She stood in her driveway, staring at the empty space where her car should have been and felt something shift inside her. This wasn't just about a statue anymore. This wasn't even about money. This was about a man who got his kicks from making other people miserable, who used his small amount of power to feel important. She'd seen it 100 times before in different forms. The aggressive guy at the gym who tried to intimidate beginners. The boss who yelled at employees because nobody at home listened to him. The spouse who controlled every little thing because they felt powerless in their own life. She walked the 2 miles to the ATM, then another 3 miles to the towing company on the edge of town. By the time she got her car back, it was early afternoon and her feet hurt. But the walk had given her time to think, and thinking had given her clarity. The neighborhood was having its annual community safety fair the next weekend. Lisa had seen the flyers posted around the area. There would be booths about fire safety, emergency preparedness, first aid training. The community center director, a kind woman named Mrs. Patterson, had actually stopped by Lisa's house earlier in the week. "I know you're new here," Mrs. Patterson had said, "but someone mentioned you used to teach self-defense classes. We'd love to have you do a short demonstration at the fair. Just basic stuff, how to stay safe, awareness techniques. It would be really valuable for our families." Lisa had hesitated. She'd kept her background quiet on purpose, wanting to just blend in and live peacefully. But Mrs. Patterson seemed genuinely kind, and the cause was good. She'd agreed to do it, figuring it would be a nice way to meet more neighbors. Now, driving home from the towing company, Lisa realized this demonstration might serve another purpose. Robert would be at that fair. He attended every community event, walking around with his clipboard like he owned the place. And maybe it was time for him to understand exactly who he'd been pushing around for the past month. That evening, Lisa went down to her basement and opened the boxes she'd never unpacked. Inside were her uniforms, her belts, her competition trophies, photos of her with students, certificates from international tournaments, a newspaper clipping from when she'd been featured in the local paper for teaching free self-defense classes to domestic violence survivors. She pulled out her black belt, the fabric worn soft from years of use. 3 gold stripes ran along one end, marking her 3rd-degree rank. She'd earned each stripe through blood, sweat, and countless hours of training. The belt smelled faintly of the dojo, that mixture of floor polish and determination that every martial artist knows. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from the man with the rumpled work shirt, the one who'd talked to her after the HOA meeting. "Robert just sent out an email. He's citing you for excessive water usage because your grass is suspiciously green. This is insane. Someone needs to stop him." Lisa looked at the text, then at her belt, then at the Buddha statue sitting peacefully on her porch, visible through the window. She typed back a simple response. "Give it 1 more week." She spent the next few days preparing for the demonstration. Not just practicing techniques, though she did that too. Mostly she was preparing mentally, the way she always had before competitions. Visualizing the scenario, thinking through possible outcomes, staying centered and calm. Robert drove by her house twice that week, slowing down each time to look at the statue, probably taking photos for his violation files. Lisa waved at him from her porch both times. The first time he pretended not to see her. The second time he just glared and drove off. On Friday evening, she got a call from Mrs. Patterson. "Lisa, I'm so sorry, but Robert is saying you need special authorization to use the community center space. He's threatening to cancel your demonstration." "It's okay," Lisa said calmly. "I'll be there tomorrow at 10, just like we planned. Don't worry about Robert." "But he's the HOA president. He can—" "Mrs. Patterson," Lisa interrupted gently. "Trust me, everything is going to be fine." After she hung up, Lisa laid out her uniform for the next day. Clean, pressed, ready. She placed her belt beside it, the 3 gold stripes catching the light. Tomorrow, Robert Henderson was going to learn an important lesson. Not about martial arts necessarily, but about what happens when you mistake someone's kindness for weakness. When you assume that quiet people have nothing to say, when you forget that the most dangerous opponents are the ones who stay calm while you're losing control. Tomorrow was going to be interesting. Saturday morning arrived with clear blue skies. Lisa put on her uniform, tied her belt with practiced ease, and drove to the community center. The parking lot was already filling up with families. Kids ran around with painted faces while volunteers set up booths decorated. With balloons and safety posters, she carried her equipment bag to the demonstration area where Mrs. Patterson had set up some floor mats. Other neighbors waved at her, some looking curious about her uniform. A few gave her encouraging smiles, the ones who knew what Robert had been putting her through. "Thank goodness you're here," Mrs. Patterson said, rushing over. "Robert showed up an hour ago making threats. I told him the program was already printed and people were expecting your demonstration." "Where is he now?" Lisa asked, scanning the crowd. "Over by the fire truck with the board members." "He keeps looking this way." Lisa started unpacking her mats, moving with calm efficiency. She'd done hundreds of these demonstrations over the years. The nervousness she'd felt as a young instructor was long gone, replaced by quiet confidence. She knew her material. More importantly, she knew herself. By 9:45, a decent crowd had gathered. Parents with kids, teenagers, elderly residents. Lisa was helping a volunteer position the last mat when she heard a familiar voice behind her. "Excuse me, excuse me." She turned to see Robert striding toward her, his face already red. 3 board members trailed behind him like uncertain ducklings. He was wearing his HOA polo shirt and carrying his tablet like a shield. "What do you think you're doing?" he demanded, loud enough that conversations nearby stopped. "Setting up for the self-defense demonstration," Lisa replied evenly. "It starts in 15 minutes. You don't have authorization to use this space. I'm the HOA president and I never approved this." Mrs. Patterson stepped forward. "Robert, I'm the community center director and I invited her. This is a public safety event. We don't need HOA approval for educational programming." Robert's face went a deeper shade of red. "This is HOA property. Everything that happens here needs my approval." He turned to Lisa. "Pack up your stuff and leave or I'll have you removed for trespassing." The crowd had grown larger now, sensing drama. Lisa could feel dozens of eyes on them. This was the moment she'd been visualizing all week. "Stay calm, stay centered. Let him show everyone who he really is." "Robert," she said quietly, "this demonstration is for the community's benefit. People are here to learn basic safety techniques. Why would you want to stop that?" "Because you're a troublemaker who doesn't follow the rules," he snapped. "You've racked up over $1,500 in fines and you think you can just do whatever you want. Those fines are for a statue on my porch and manufactured violations. You invented because I wouldn't back down." "Manufactured?" Robert stepped closer, using his height to try to intimidate her. "I don't manufacture anything. You're in violation of community standards and now you're trespassing. I want you gone now." Lisa didn't move, didn't step back, didn't raise her voice. She simply stood there, grounded, balanced, meeting his eyes with steady calm. It was a technique she'd taught 1,000 students. When someone tries to intimidate you with size or volume, stillness is your greatest weapon. "I'm not leaving," she said. "These people came to learn something useful. Then I'll call the police and have you arrested." "For what?" "Teaching people self-defense in a public community space with the director's permission." Robert opened his mouth to respond, but a voice interrupted him. "Sensei Chen, is that you?" Everyone turned. A teenage boy was pushing through the crowd, his face lighting up with recognition. He was maybe 16, wearing a hoodie and jeans, but the way he moved showed training. Lisa's mind raced through hundreds of former students before placing him. "Danny," she said, surprised. "Danny Martinez?" "Yes." "Oh man, I can't believe it's you." The kid practically bounced with excitement. He turned to his parents standing behind him. "Mom, Dad, this is Sensei Chen. I told you about her, remember? She taught at the academy downtown before we moved here." Danny's mother smiled warmly. "You're the instructor Danny talks about constantly. He says you changed his life." The boy was already talking to the crowd, his voice full of pride. "Sensei Chen isn't just any instructor. She's a 3rd-degree black belt in Shotokan karate. She won the National Kata Championship 3 years in a row. She's taught police officers, military personnel, and runs those women's self-defense seminars that were in the news." The crowd murmured with interest. People pulled out phones, clearly searching for her name. Lisa felt her cheeks warm. She'd wanted to keep a low profile, but Danny's enthusiasm was genuine and sweet. She couldn't be mad at him for it. Robert's face had gone from red to pale. That doesn't matter. She still needs authorization. But Danny wasn't done. He looked at Robert with the innocent bluntness only teenagers can pull off. Sir, why would you want to stop someone like her from teaching people? She's literally one of the best instructors in the state. When I was getting bullied at my old school, she taught me how to stand up for myself without fighting. She's amazing. The word bullied hung in the air like smoke. Several people in the crowd exchanged glances. The connection wasn't hard to make. Here was Robert trying to bully Lisa in front of everyone. And here was this kid talking about how Lisa taught him to deal with bullies. One of the board members, a woman in her 50s, stepped away from Robert's side. Actually, Robert, I think we should let the demonstration proceed. It seems like the community would benefit from it. Janet, we discussed this, Robert started. No, you told us what to think, Janet said firmly. But I'm watching you try to intimidate someone in front of children and I'm not comfortable with it. She has every right to be here. Another board member nodded. I agree. This has gone far enough. Robert looked around, realizing he was losing control of the situation. His tablet, his title, his threats, none of it was working. The crowd was clearly on Lisa's side. Even his own board was turning against him. Fine, he said through clenched teeth. Do your little demonstration. But this isn't over. Not by a long shot. He turned and walked toward the parking lot, his remaining supporters following uncertainly. Mrs. Patterson let out a breath she'd been holding. While that was intense, Lisa watched Robert's retreating figure, then turned to Danny with a genuine smile. It's really good to see you. Want to help me demonstrate some techniques? Are you kidding? Absolutely. As Lisa began her demonstration, teaching basic awareness and simple defensive moves, she noticed something. More people kept arriving, word spreading through the fair about the skilled instructor who'd stood up to Robert Henderson. Parents watched attentively. Teenagers took videos. Even the firefighters from the truck came over to watch. She taught them about confidence, about awareness, about how real strength comes from inner calm, not aggression. She showed them that you don't need violence to be powerful. You just need to stand firm, stay true to yourself, and refuse to be moved by those who try to push you down. And somewhere in the parking lot, Robert Henderson was learning that intimidation only works on people who are afraid. He'd picked the wrong person to bully. The question now was what he'd do when he realized he'd already lost. The demonstration ended to genuine applause. Parents thanked Lisa personally. Several women asked about private lessons. Danny's mother handed her a business card, saying they should stay in touch. As Lisa packed up her mats, she felt something she hadn't felt since moving to Pinewood Heights. She felt welcome. Over the next few days, something shifted in the neighborhood. People who had previously hurried past her house now stopped to chat. The elderly neighbor who'd warned her about Robert brought over homemade cookies. The man with the rumpled shirt waved from his car and gave her a thumbs up. Even the quiet family across the street invited her to their daughter's birthday party. But the real change started with an email. It arrived Tuesday morning in Lisa's inbox with the subject line, "We need to talk." It was from Janet, the board member who'd spoken up at the fair. Inside was a simple message. Can you meet me for coffee? There are things you should know. They met at a small cafe outside the neighborhood. Janet looked tired, like she hadn't slept well. She ordered a large coffee and got straight to the point. I've been on the HOA board for 6 years, she said. I joined because I thought it would be a good way to help the community. But Robert has turned it into his personal kingdom. Everything has to go through him. Every decision. Every vote. He's threatened to fine board members if we disagree with him publicly. He can do that? Lisa asked. Technically, no, but he finds ways. He cited my husband for a violation that didn't exist, then made it go away when I voted his way. That's how he operates, fear and control. Janet pulled out a folder. Inside were printed emails, documented complaints, and records of other homeowners who'd been targeted by Robert over the years. The evidence was damning. He'd systematically bullied anyone who questioned his authority, using the HOA rules as a weapon rather than a guideline. Why are you showing me this? Lisa asked. Because I saw what you did at the fair. You didn't back down, but you didn't fight dirty either. You just stood there, calm and dignified, and made him look like exactly what he is, a bully. Janet took a sip of her coffee. The other board members and I have been talking. We want to call for a vote to remove him as president. But we need support from the community. And after what happened at the fair, people are finally willing to speak up. What do you need from me? Just be at the next HOA meeting. We're calling an emergency session for Thursday night. If Robert tries to shut us down or intimidate anyone, we need someone who won't fold under pressure. Lisa thought about it. She'd moved here for peace and quiet, not to get involved in neighborhood politics. But she'd learned a long time ago that sometimes peace isn't something you find. Sometimes you have to create it. I'll be there, she said. The word spread quickly. By Wednesday afternoon, nearly every homeowner in Pinewood Heights knew about the emergency meeting. The community center parking lot was packed by 7 o'clock Thursday evening. Lisa arrived early and sat in the middle section this time, not in the back. Robert walked in at exactly 7:30, his usual time. But when he saw the crowd, his confident stride faltered. There had to be 60 people in the room, maybe more. The last regular meeting had barely drawn 20. He took his seat at the front table, banging his gavel harder than necessary. I call this meeting to order. I understand some board members requested this emergency session, though I'm not sure why. We just had a meeting 2 weeks ago. Janet stood up. Robert, we're here to discuss your conduct as HOA president and to call for a vote on your removal from that position. The room went silent. Robert's face cycled through several emotions before settling on anger. That's ridiculous. You can't just remove a sitting president without cause. We have cause, Janet said calmly. She began reading from the documentation. Stories of harassment, manufactured violations, threats, intimidation. She cited specific sections of the HOA bylaws that Robert had violated. His misuse of power, his abuse of the fine system, his pattern of targeting anyone who disagreed with him. Robert tried to interrupt several times, banging his gavel, but Janet kept talking. Other board members stood and added their own testimonies. Then homeowners started standing up one after another, sharing their stories. The man who'd had to cut down his tree. The family forced to repaint their house. The woman who'd been fined for a crooked mailbox that wasn't actually crooked. Robert tried his usual tactics. He raised his voice. He quoted rules. He threatened consequences. But something had changed. The fear that had kept everyone quiet was gone, replaced by collective courage. When you see one person stand up to a bully, it becomes easier to stand up yourself. Finally, Robert pointed at Lisa. This is all her fault. She moved here and started causing trouble. Before her, everything was fine. Lisa stood up slowly. Every eye in the room turned to her. She thought carefully about what to say, remembering what her instructor had taught her about the difference between fighting and standing firm. Robert, she said, her voice calm and clear. I moved here hoping for a peaceful place to live. I planted some flowers. I put a small statue on my porch. Those aren't troublemaking activities. You chose to turn them into problems because you like having control over people. That's not leadership. That's bullying. She paused, looking around the room. I've spent 20 years teaching people how to deal with bullies. The most important lesson I learned is this. Bullies only have power when good people stay silent. The moment everyone speaks up together, the bully becomes powerless. Robert stood up, his chair scraping loudly. I don't have to listen to this. I've been president of this HOA for 8 years. I've maintained property values. I've kept standards high. By making people miserable, Janet said. By fining them into compliance? That's not maintaining standards, Robert. That's abuse of power. The vote was called. The motion to remove Robert Henderson as HOA president passed 42-3. Even one of his longtime supporters voted against him. Robert gathered his papers in silence, his hands shaking slightly. As he walked toward the exit, he paused near Lisa's row. For a moment, she thought he might say something. But he just looked at her with an expression that was hard to read. Not quite defeat, not quite understanding, but maybe the beginning of recognition that he'd become exactly what no one respected. After he left, Janet was nominated as the new president. She accepted with a promise to review all outstanding fines and violations, starting with Lisa's. The meeting ended with something Lisa had never seen at an HOA gathering. People actually smiling and talking to each other like neighbors, instead of strangers living in fear. A week later, Lisa's fines were officially dismissed as unfounded. The Buddha statue remained on her porch. Her garden flourished with flowers in pots of every color she wanted. And when she sat in her rocking chair in the evenings, neighbors would wave and stop to chat. She never heard from Robert again. Rumor had it he'd moved to a different community, one where he was just another resident with no power over anyone. Lisa learned something too. Sometimes the best fight is the one you win without throwing a single punch. You just stand firm, stay true to yourself, and trust that courage, like fear, can spread from person to person until it becomes something powerful enough to change everything. And that small Buddha statue on her porch? It sat there peacefully just as it always had, a reminder that real strength doesn't need to announce itself. It simply exists calm and unshakable, waiting for the moment when it's needed most.